The great crystal hall on Zephyria Prime stretched for miles in every direction. Light danced through its transparent walls, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled alien races. This was the center of the galactic hegemony, where the most powerful beings in the known universe made decisions that affected billions of worlds. Commander Vexthari stood at the center of the hall. His scales gleamed dark green under the crystal lights. Like all Saurians, he was tall and lean, with yellow eyes that missed nothing. Behind him floated a massive hologram showing a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. Earth, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the hall. Third planet from its sun. Population 8 billion. They call themselves humans. The assembled aliens stirred with interest. Representatives from dozens of species filled the hall. The insectoid hive queens clicked their mandibles together. The aquatic depth wardens shifted in their water-filled suits. The energy beings known as the ethereals glowed brighter. These humans have just learned to travel faster than light, Vexthari continued. They have built colonies on 3 nearby worlds. Their technology grows quickly. Too quickly. General Thraxon rose from her position among the hive queens. Her 6 legs carried her massive body forward with surprising grace. Her compound eyes reflected the hologram as she spoke. How many ships do they have? She asked. Less than 1,000, Vexthari replied. Primitive weapons. Basic shields. They should be easy to conquer. A sound like rushing water came from the depth warden section. Admiral Quilthes emerged from his tank, water streaming from his blue-green skin. Gills fluttered on his neck as he spoke. Why do we need to conquer them at all? He asked. They are far from our borders. They have nothing we need. Vexithari's eyes narrowed. Because they learn too fast. Look at these records. The hologram changed, showing human ships from 50 years ago compared to current designs. 50 years ago, they could barely leave their own planet. Now they cross the galaxy. In another 50 years, they might challenge us. Impossible, General Thraxon clicked. We have ruled for 10,000 years. We have millions of ships, billions of soldiers. No single planet could threaten us. That is what we thought about the Centauri Federation, Vexthari reminded them, and the Arcturus Empire. Both grew too strong before we acted. We had to fight long wars to defeat them. It cost us much. The hall fell quiet. Every being present remembered those wars. The Centauri had resisted for 30 years before falling. The Arcturus Empire had lasted even longer. Both conflicts had drained the hegemony's resources. From the ethereal section came a sound like singing crystal. Ambassador Kethamora floated forward, their translucent body glowing with soft light. They were ancient even by ethereal standards. They had observed the rise and fall of 100 civilizations. I must speak, Kethamora said. Their voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. I have watched these humans for many cycles. I have seen their wars, their struggles, their triumphs. I tell you now, do not attack them. General Thraxon's mandibles clicked in amusement. You fear these primitives? I fear what they become when cornered, Kethamora replied. Listen to me, all of you. I have studied every species we have conquered. All of them, when faced with superior force, eventually surrender. They seek to preserve their lives, their culture, something of themselves. This is logical. This is sane. The ambassador floated higher, their glow brightening. Humans are different. When faced with destruction, they do not calculate odds. They do not seek compromise. They become more dangerous, not less. Ridiculous, Admiral Quilthes said. All species have a breaking point. Not these ones, Kethamora insisted. I have watched their history. They have fought wars that killed millions of their own kind. They have continued fighting when victory was impossible. They have died rather than submit again and again throughout their history. Vexithari studied the ancient being. What exactly are you saying? I am saying that humans have a trait we have never encountered, Kethamora replied. Call it madness, call it courage, call it whatever you wish. When they are attacked, when they are threatened with destruction, they do not surrender. They cannot surrender. It is not in their nature. The hall erupted in discussion. Voices, clicks, chirps, and electronic sounds filled the air. Some aliens laughed at the idea. Others asked for more details. A few seemed concerned. General Thraxon stood again. Even if this is true, so what? We have faced desperate enemies before. Desperation makes them foolish. They throw away their lives for nothing. That is where you are wrong, Kethamora said sadly. Humans do not throw away their lives. They spend them. Like a weapon. They will trade one human life to kill 10 of us. They will sacrifice a ship to destroy a fleet. They will burn their own worlds rather than let us have them. You exaggerate, Vexthari said. No species would destroy itself rather than surrender. The ethereal's glow dimmed. Shall I show you their history? Shall I tell you about their wars? About cities they defended until every building was rubble. About soldiers who continued fighting with broken bones and mortal wounds. About civilians who became warriors when their homes were threatened. Kethmora gestured, and the hologram changed. Images of human conflicts filled the air. Battles fought in terrible conditions. Soldiers advancing into impossible odds. Cities reduced to ash. Their defenders fighting to the last. Look at this, the ambassador continued. A place they called Stalingrad. The humans fought for months in the ruins of their own city. They lived in sewers and basements. They made weapons from scrap metal. They never stopped fighting, even when outnumbered 10-1. More images appeared. Here, a fortress called the Alamo. 200 humans faced 20,000 enemies. They knew they would die. They chose to fight anyway. Their last message was victory or death. General Thraxon seemed less amused now. These are just stories from their past. War has changed. Modern species are more civilized, are they? Kethmora asked. Look at their recent conflicts. New images appeared. Human soldiers in strange environments fighting against terrible odds. They have fought on ice worlds where the cold would kill most species. They have battled in deserts that boil in the day and freeze at night. They have continued fighting when wounded, when outnumbered, when their commanders were dead and their supplies gone. Admiral Quilthes studied the images. They seem persistent, but persistence is not enough against overwhelming force. It is more than persistence, Kethmora replied. It is something deeper, something that goes to the core of what they are. When you attack a human, you do not just threaten their life. You threaten their idea of what life should be, and they will die before they let you change that idea. The hall fell silent again. The images continued to play. Humans fighting against impossible odds, never giving up, never surrendering. Vexthari broke the silence. Even if this is all true, we still outnumber them millions to one. We have technology they cannot match. We have weapons that could destroy their entire planet. And do you think that will make them surrender? Kethmora asked. Or will it make them more determined to fight? What happens when you corner an animal that believes death is better than captivity? It dies, General Thraxon said flatly. Yes, Kethmora agreed. But how many does it kill first? How much does it cost you? And what about the other animals that see what you have done? The ancient being floated closer to the center of the hall. I will tell you what will happen if you attack these humans. You will win your battles. You will conquer their worlds. You will kill billions of them. But you will not break them. They will fight you with sticks and stones if necessary. They will teach their children to hate you. They will make your victory so costly that it becomes defeat. Enough! Vexthari's voice echoed through the hall. We did not build this empire by fearing primitives. The humans are a threat that will only grow larger. We must act now while we still can. He turned to address the full assembly. Think of our children. Think of our worlds. Do we wait until these humans have fleets to match ours? Do we let them become another Centauri Federation? Another threat to our peace and stability? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. The logic was clear. It was better to face a weak enemy now than a strong one later. General Thraxon stepped forward. I volunteer the Hive Queens to lead the assault. We will show these humans what real war looks like. Admiral Quilthes nodded reluctantly. The Depth Wardens will provide support. But I suggest we offer surrender terms first. Terms? Vexthari asked. Simple ones. They become our servants. They give up their weapons and their ships. In exchange, they live. Most species accept such terms when faced with certain death. Kethmora's glow flared brightly. They will not accept. I am trying to tell you. They would rather die. Then they will die, General Thraxon said coldly. And the galaxy will be safer for it. The vote was called. One by one, each species cast their decision. The Saurians voted for war. The Hive Queens voted for war. The Depth Wardens voted for war, though reluctantly. The machine intelligence known as the Collective voted for war. Their calculations showed humans as a statistical threat. Only the Ethereals voted against the war. When the count was finished, Vexthari stood to announce the result. The galactic hegemony will move against the human worlds. We will offer surrender terms. If they refuse, we will take their worlds by force. Kethmora floated in the center of the hall, their light dim with sorrow. You have made a terrible mistake. These humans, they will bleed, yes. They will suffer beyond measure. But they will never surrender, never. Then they will die, Vexthari replied. The ancient ethereal turned to leave. As they reached the edge of the hall, they spoke once more, their voice carrying clearly despite the distance. They will bleed. But before they are finished bleeding, they will teach you the true cost of war. They will show you what happens when you fight a species that values freedom more than life itself. The great crystal hall fell silent as Kethmora departed. The assembled aliens looked at each other with uncertainty. But the decision was made. War fleets would be assembled. The human worlds would be conquered or destroyed. None of them truly understood what they had chosen to begin. In the depths of space, human colonies continued their daily lives. Children played in parks under alien suns. Adults worked to build new worlds. Scientists pushed the boundaries of knowledge. They had no idea that the largest military force in galactic history was being assembled to destroy them. They did not know that their entire species had been judged a threat by beings they had never met. But soon they would learn, and when they did, the galaxy would discover what Ambassador Kethmora had tried so desperately to warn them about. The humans would bleed, but they would never, ever surrender. Admiral Quilthes floated in his command chamber, watching the blue world grow larger on his screens. Earth hung in space like a jewel, white clouds swirling over green continents and blue oceans. It looked peaceful, beautiful even. Around him, 300 hegemony warships moved in perfect formation. Saurian dreadnoughts with their long, sleek hulls. Hive Queen battle carriers swarming with fighter craft. Depth Warden cruisers that moved through space like they moved through water. It was the largest fleet ever assembled against a single world. Contact the humans, Quilthes ordered. Tell them to surrender. The communications officer, a young Saurian named Veltar, worked at his controls. Human ships are approaching, Admiral. 50, 60. They keep coming. On the main screen, human vessels appeared like tiny sparks against the darkness. They were smaller than hegemony ships, their designs crude and angular. Some looked like they had been built in a hurry. How many? Quilthes asked. 200 ships, Admiral. Maybe less. The Admiral's gills fluttered with what might have been amusement. 200 ships against 300. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned. This would be over quickly. Admiral, Veltar said, we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through. The screen flickered, showing a human female in a blue uniform. She had short gray hair and hard eyes. Behind her, Quilthes could see the bridge of a human ship, cramped, covered in screens and flashing lights. I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force, the human said. You have entered Earth space without permission. Leave now or face the consequences. Quilthes moved closer to his own communication device. I am Admiral Quilthes of the Galactic Hegemony. You are surrounded and outnumbered. Surrender now, and your people will be spared. The human admiral smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Admiral Quilthes, you have made a grave mistake coming here. We do not surrender. We do not yield. And we do not run. You have 200 ships, Quilthes replied. We have 300. Your weapons are primitive. Your shields are weak. This is not bravery, it is suicide. Maybe, Admiral Chen said. But it is our choice to make. She leaned forward, her eyes seeming to look directly through the screen at Quilthes. Tell your leaders this. We will make you pay for every inch of space you take. We will make you remember the cost of attacking Earth. The transmission ended. Quilthes stared at the blank screen for a moment. The human's words echoed in his mind. He thought of Ambassador Kethmora's warnings back on Zephyria Prime. Perhaps there was something different about these creatures. Admiral, Veltar said nervously, the human ships are advancing. On the tactical display, the human fleet was moving forward in a loose formation. They were not running. They were not asking for terms. They were preparing to fight. All ships, Quilthes broadcast to his fleet, prepare for battle. Remember, we offer surrender once more before firing. The hegemony ships moved into attack formation. Weapons powered up. Shield generators hummed to life. Fighter craft launched from carrier bays. The two fleets met in the space between Earth and its moon. Attention human vessels, Quilthes transmitted on all frequencies. This is your final chance. Surrender now and you will be treated with honor. The human response came not in words but in action. Every human ship opened fire at once. The battle began. At first it went as Quilthes expected. Human weapons were weaker than hegemony shields. Human ships were smaller and less armored. The aliens had superior numbers and technology. But something was wrong. The humans did not fight like any enemy the hegemony had faced. When their shields failed, they kept fighting. When their weapons were destroyed, they used their ships as weapons. When faced with certain death, they accelerated toward it. Lieutenant Commander Jackson piloted his destroyer, Defiant, straight at a Saurian dreadnought 3 times its size. His ship was already dying, hull breached, engines failing, half his crew dead or wounded. "Sir," his tactical officer shouted over the alarms. "We should retreat." "Negative," Jackson replied calmly. "Set collision course. All power to forward shield, and sir, we're going to ram that bastard." The tactical officer's eyes went wide, but he followed orders. The Defiant accelerated directly toward the alien ship, its remaining weapons firing continuously. On the Saurian dreadnought, Conquest, Captain Zarthan watched the human ship, approaching with disbelief. "They are trying to ram us," his weapons officer reported. "Impossible. No sane commander would sacrifice his ship." "Sir, they are not changing course." The Defiant struck the Conquest's forward hull at full speed. The explosion tore through both ships. The human destroyer was completely destroyed, but it took the alien dreadnought's forward weapon systems with it. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out again and again. Captain Maria Santos of the cruiser New York faced 5 Hive Queen fighters after her ship's weapons were destroyed. Instead of surrendering, she vented her ship's atmosphere to confuse their sensors, then used manual thrusters to spin the cruiser like a giant club, smashing 2 fighters with her hull. Commander David Kim of the corvette Seoul found himself surrounded by enemy ships. His engines were dead, his weapons offline, his crew trapped in a sinking ship. He did the only thing he could do. He overloaded his reactor and took 6 alien ships with him in the explosion. Admiral Quilthes watched the battle with growing horror. His ships were winning, but the cost was terrible. For every human ship destroyed, he lost one of his own, sometimes more. "Admiral," Veltar reported, "the humans are targeting our command ships specifically." It was true. Human pilots were ignoring easier targets to strike at hegemony command vessels. They seemed to understand that killing alien officers was more valuable than destroying common soldiers. Captain Rebecca Walsh of the battleship Freedom demonstrated this perfectly. Her ship was burning and losing atmosphere, her crew reduced to half strength. But she spotted a Depth Warden command cruiser trying to retreat from the battle. "All weapons. Target that cruiser," she ordered. "Ma'am, we have closer targets," her weapons officer said. "That ship is coordinating their defense. Take it down." The Freedom's remaining guns spoke as one. The alien cruiser's shields collapsed under the concentrated fire. The ship tried to escape, but Walsh pursued it even as her own vessel fell apart around her. The Freedom died in the chase, but not before its final missiles found their target. The alien command ship exploded in a brilliant flash, taking its entire crew with it. On the surface of Earth, billions of people watched the battle through telescopes and radar. They saw their ships dying one by one. They saw the alien fleet closing on their world. But they also saw something else. They saw their people fighting to the end. They saw human ships ramming alien vessels twice their size. They saw their defenders choosing death over surrender. In the orbital defense stations around Earth, the story was the same. Station Commander Lisa Park watched alien Marines cutting through her station's hull. Her defenses were failing. Her weapons were destroyed. Half her crew was dead. "Commander," her second-in-command said, "they're demanding surrender." Park looked at the blast doors that were slowly giving way to alien cutting tools. Beyond those doors waited creatures that had come to conquer her world. "Tell them no," she said simply. "Ma'am, tell them no, and then blow the reactor." The young officer stared at her. "Ma'am, that will kill everyone on the station. It will also kill every alien Marine trying to board us." Park's voice was calm, matter of fact. "That's a trade I'm willing to make." The defense station exploded like a small sun. The alien boarding parties died instantly, but so did 50 human defenders who chose to take their enemies with them, rather than surrender. The same scene played out on 12 other stations around Earth. In space, the human fleet was dying. Admiral Chen's flagship Enterprise was the last major human ship still fighting. Its hull was cracked, its weapons were failing, and fires burned on every deck. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "Admiral Quilthess is requesting to speak with you." Chen wiped blood from her forehead where a falling beam had struck her. "Put him through." The alien admiral appeared on her damaged screen. He looked shaken, disturbed by what he had witnessed. "Admiral Chen," he said, "your fleet is destroyed. Your defenses are broken. Surrender now and I will spare your remaining crew." Chen looked around her burning bridge. Bodies lay where they had fallen. Sparks flew from damaged equipment. The smell of smoke and death filled the air. "Admiral Quilthess," she said, "let me explain something to you. You think this battle is over because our ships are burning. You think you have won because your fleet outnumbers our survivors." She stood up, swaying slightly from her injuries. "But you don't understand what you're fighting. You're not fighting ships. You're not fighting weapons. You're fighting an idea." "What idea?" the alien asked. "The idea that Earth belongs to humans. The idea that we choose our own fate. The idea that freedom is worth dying for." Chen's voice grew stronger with each word. "You can destroy every ship in our fleet. You can kill every person on this bridge, but you cannot kill that idea." Quilthess was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "You are brave, Admiral Chen, but bravery will not save your world." "Maybe not," Chen admitted, "but it will make you remember us. Every human who dies today will cost you something, and tomorrow more humans will be born. They will grow up knowing what you did here. They will learn to fight you. They will never, ever forgive." The Enterprise shuddered as alien weapons found their mark again. Chen gripped her command chair to stay standing. "This is not over, Admiral," she said. "This is just the beginning." The transmission ended as the Enterprise's power failed. Chen turned to her remaining crew, perhaps a dozen people still alive on the bridge. "Well," she said with a slight smile, "I guess we go down with the ship." Her crew smiled back. They were scared, but they were ready. They had chosen their path. The Enterprise died fighting, its final shots taking out 2 more alien vessels. When the battle ended, Admiral Quilthess found himself staring at a field of debris. Human and alien ships mixed together in death, twisted metal and frozen bodies drifting in the darkness. His fleet had won. Earth's orbital defenses were destroyed. The human fleet was annihilated. The way to the planet was clear, but the victory felt hollow. "Admiral," Veltar said quietly, "final casualty report." Quilthess dreaded the answer. "Tell me." "We have lost 147 ships, 30,000 personnel dead or wounded." The Admiral's gills fluttered with shock. They had started with 300 ships. Now they had 153. The humans, with their primitive weapons and smaller fleet, had destroyed nearly half the most powerful armada in galactic history. "And the humans?" "Total fleet destruction. No survivors detected." Quilthess nodded slowly. By any military standard, this was a complete victory. The enemy was destroyed, the objective achieved. So why did he feel like he had lost? He thought of Admiral Chen's final words. "This is just the beginning." What had she meant by that? "Admiral," the communications officer said, "we are receiving signals from the planet's surface. Put them through." The signal was weak and broke up frequently, but the message was clear. It came from hundreds of sources across Earth, military bases, government buildings, civilian radio stations. The message was simple: we do not surrender. Quilthess closed his eyes. He understood now what Ambassador Kethamora had tried to warn them about. This was not a normal species. Normal beings, when faced with overwhelming force, would seek to preserve themselves. They would negotiate, compromise, find a way to survive. These humans were different. They had chosen to fight knowing they would die. They had sacrificed themselves not for victory but for principle. They would rather die free than live as slaves, and somehow that made them more dangerous than any weapon. "Begin the invasion," he ordered quietly. His surviving ships moved toward Earth. But as they descended through the atmosphere toward the blue world below, every alien aboard knew that the real war was just beginning. On the surface of Earth, people watched alien ships blotting out the sun. They mourned their dead heroes. They prepared for occupation, but they did not prepare to surrender. Admiral Chen had been right about one thing. This was just the beginning. The humans would bleed, but they would never surrender. General Zarketh stood in the ruins of what had once been New York City. 6 months had passed since the hegemony conquered Earth, and the great human metropolis was now the center of alien administration. Saurian buildings grew like crystals from the broken concrete. Hive queen tunnels ran beneath the streets. Depth warden pools filled the subway systems. The conquest was complete. Human governments had fallen. Their military was destroyed. Their leaders were dead or in hiding. By every measure that mattered, Earth belonged to the galactic hegemony. So why did Zarketh feel like he was losing? "General," his aide Captain Mordoon said, approaching with a data pad. "The daily casualty report." Zarketh took the pad and studied the numbers. 43 hegemony soldiers killed yesterday, 67 wounded, 2 supply convoys destroyed, 1 command post attacked, 3 communications towers sabotaged. "This is getting worse," the general muttered. "Sir?" Zarketh walked to the window of his command center, looking out over the occupied city. Alien soldiers patrolled the streets in groups of 6, never alone, never in pairs. They had learned that lesson early. Humans had a talent for making isolated aliens disappear. "When we invaded," he said, "I lost 147 ships and 30,000 soldiers. That was expected. War is costly." He gestured to the datapad. "But in 6 months of occupation, I have lost another 50,000 soldiers." 50,000? Fighting an enemy that supposedly surrendered? Captain Morden shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, the humans have not surrendered." "Not officially. Their governments collapsed, but what?" Zarketh turned from the window. "There is no human fleet. No human army. No human government. What are we fighting? Resistance cells, sir. Civilian groups. They what? They attack supply convoys with improvised explosives. They shoot our soldiers from buildings and then disappear. They poison our food supplies. They hack our communications." Zarketh's voice rose with frustration. "These are not soldiers. These are shopkeepers and teachers and mechanics. But they were deadly shopkeepers and teachers and mechanics." 3 days ago, a human grandmother named Martha Stevens had walked into a Hive Queen administrative building carrying a basket of fresh bread. She smiled at the guards, spoke politely to the clerks, and handed out warm rolls to anyone who wanted one. The bread was filled with a slow-acting poison that Martha had learned to make from internet videos before the communications networks were destroyed. 17 aliens died. Martha was caught and executed, but she died smiling. Yesterday, a 12-year-old boy named Tommy Chen, no relation to the dead admiral, had offered to shine the boots of Saurian soldiers. He was just a kid trying to earn some food. The aliens felt sorry for him and let him work. Tommy had mixed acid into his boot polish. 8 soldiers were injured before they caught him. When they demanded to know why he had done it, the boy looked up at his captors with tear-filled eyes and said, "Because you killed my parents." These were not isolated incidents. They happened every day, all across Earth. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been a veterinarian before the invasion. Now she ran a resistance cell from the ruins of her animal hospital. She specialized in creating biological weapons from common household chemicals. Her group had killed over 200 aliens in 3 months. When hegemony forces finally tracked her down, they found her in an operating room, calmly tending to a wounded human fighter. She looked up at the alien soldiers pointing weapons at her. "Are you going to kill me?" she asked. "Surrender and you will live," the squad leader said. Dr. Mitchell returned to her work. "I can't surrender," she said matter-of-factly. "I have patients to care for." The aliens shot her, but as she died, she triggered a device that released a cloud of toxic gas. Half the squad died with her. General Zarketh had read all the reports. He had studied every attack, every incident, every act of resistance, and he was beginning to understand something that chilled him to his core. The humans were not fighting to win. They could not win, everyone knew that. They were fighting to make the occupation as costly as possible. Every alien death was a victory to them. Every successful attack was worth celebrating, even if it meant their own death. "Sir," Captain Morden said, interrupting his thoughts, "we have another situation. What now?" "The water treatment plant in Sector 7, the humans, they contaminated it." Zarketh's eyes widened. "Contaminated how?" "Biological agent, sir. Something that makes our species sick, but does not affect humans. Thousands of our personnel have been exposed." The general slammed his fist on the desk. "How is this possible?" "We guard all critical infrastructure. Sir, the humans who did this, they worked at the plant. They had access for months. They waited until the contamination could spread throughout the system before activating it. So they poisoned their own water supply? Yes, sir. They made themselves immune first, then poisoned the water that both species use. They were willing to risk their own lives to hurt us. This was the pattern everywhere. Humans would sabotage their own power plants rather than let aliens use the electricity. They would destroy their own bridges rather than let hegemony vehicles cross them. They would burn their own farms rather than let alien forces eat the food. It was madness. It was illogical. It was effective. In London, Professor James Watson had been a history teacher before the war. Now he led a group that specialized in psychological warfare. They would leave messages for alien soldiers, descriptions of how their families back home were mourning them, images of the soldiers they had killed, reminders that they were far from home fighting people who had never attacked their worlds. The messages were always signed the same way. You can kill us all, but you cannot make us surrender. Every day you stay on Earth, more of you die. Every day you stay on Earth, you become more like us, killers who are far from home. How long before you become what you came here to destroy? The psychological reports from hegemony field units were disturbing. Soldiers were requesting transfers off Earth. Some were reporting nightmares, hallucinations, nervous breakdowns. The constant stress of never knowing when the next attack would come was wearing them down. Corporal Veclon of the Saurian Marines had been on Earth for 4 months. He had watched friends die in attacks that came from nowhere. He had seen humans smile as they detonated explosives that killed them along with their targets. He had stopped sleeping well. They are everywhere, he told the unit psychologist. You cannot tell a resistance fighter from a civilian. The old woman selling fruit might have a bomb. The child playing in the street might be gathering intelligence. They all look innocent, but they all hate us. They are just primitives, the psychologist said. They cannot truly threaten you. Veclon laughed, but there was no humor in it. That human grandmother who poisoned our food. She looked like she was someone's beloved grandmother. Sweet, harmless kind. She probably was someone's beloved grandmother. But she was also a killer who spent weeks planning how to murder us. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Do you understand? They do not have soldiers and civilians. They are all soldiers. Every human on this planet is a potential enemy. Even the ones who seem friendly, who cooperate with us, who follow our orders. We never know if they are just waiting for the right moment. The psychologist made notes. This was the 7th similar case this week. In what had been called the United States, a region now administered by the Hive Queens, the situation was even worse. The humans there had a cultural tradition of civilian weapons ownership. When the government fell, the weapons did not disappear. They were hidden. Queen Kethelex had been confident that her forces could handle scattered resistance. Hive Queen society was highly organized, perfectly coordinated. Surely they could impose order on these chaotic humans. She had not expected the humans to be so creative in their chaos. A human named Robert Davis, who had been an engineer, spent 3 months studying Hive Queen vehicle designs. Then he began building improvised explosive devices specifically designed to penetrate their armor. His bombs killed dozens of aliens before he was caught. When they captured him, Robert was in his basement workshop surrounded by half-finished weapons. He looked up at his captors calmly. Took you long enough, he said. Why do you do this? Queen Kethelex asked through a translator. Your cause is hopeless. We have won. Robert smiled sadly. Ma'am, with all due respect, you have not won anything. You have conquered a planet, but you have not conquered its people. And as long as even one human refuses to accept your rule, you will never truly win. We will break your resistance eventually. Maybe, Robert admitted. You might kill all of us, but you will remember the cost. And other species will learn what it costs to fight humans. They will know that we do not surrender. Queen Kethelex ordered his execution, but his words haunted her. How many more humans were out there building weapons in basements and garages? How many more attacks were being planned while she stood there? The answer came the next day. 17 coordinated strikes across the region. Supply depots destroyed. Command posts attacked. Communication towers sabotaged. All timed to happen simultaneously, showing a level of organization that should have been impossible for a defeated enemy. But the most disturbing incident happened in what had been called Chicago. Captain Elena Vasquez had been a police officer before the invasion. She had seen her city destroyed, her fellow officers killed, her government toppled. When the aliens demanded that local humans form a new police force to help maintain order, She volunteered. For 2 months, Captain Vasquez worked with the occupying forces. She helped track down resistance fighters. She provided information about human behavior. She seemed to be a model collaborator. Then one day she walked into a meeting of senior hegemony officers. She was carrying reports as she always did. She smiled and nodded to the aliens she had worked with for months, and then she detonated the bomb she had been carrying under her uniform. The explosion killed 12 high-ranking officers and wounded 20 more. Captain Vasquez died instantly, but investigators later discovered that she had spent months gathering intelligence, mapping security procedures, and planning the attack. Her collaboration had been one long infiltration mission. Her final report found in her apartment ended with these words: "I have served my city, my country, and my species. I die knowing that these alien invaders will never be safe on our world. Every human they think they can trust might be their enemy. Every day they stay here, more of them will die. This is our planet, and we will never surrender it." General Zarketh read that report 3 times. Each time he understood a little more why Ambassador Kethamora had warned against attacking the humans. They were not fighting a conventional war. They were fighting something else entirely. A war where the enemy considered every casualty inflicted on the invader a victory, regardless of the cost to themselves. "Sir," Captain Mordoun said, entering the general's office with yet another report, "the supply situation is getting worse." "How much worse?" "We have lost 60% of our supply convoys in the last month. The humans are using increasingly sophisticated tactics. They study our routes, learn our procedures, then strike when we are most vulnerable." Zarketh rubbed his temples. "What about the new security measures?" "They adapt, sir. We change our convoy patterns, they find new ways to attack. We increase our escort strength, they use bigger bombs. We vary our timing, they gather more intelligence first." The general stood and walked to his window again. Outside, he could see hegemony soldiers patrolling in their heavily armored groups. They moved carefully, checking every corner, scanning every building. They looked like soldiers in enemy territory, which he realized they were. "Captain," he said quietly, "how many hegemony personnel are currently stationed on Earth?" 2 million, sir. Soldiers, administrators, technicians, support staff. "And how many humans are still alive?" "Approximately 7 billion, sir." Zarketh was quiet for a long moment. 2 million aliens trying to control 7 billion humans who refuse to be controlled. The mathematics were daunting. "Sir?" Mordoun asked. "Are you all right?" The general turned from the window. "Captain, I want you to prepare a report for Hegemony Command. Tell them that Earth is secure, but maintaining that security requires significant resources." "How significant, sir?" Zarketh thought of all the attacks, all the casualties, all the resistance fighters who died smiling, because they had killed one more alien. He thought of Captain Vasquez and Dr. Mitchell and Martha Stevens and all the others who had chosen death over submission. "Tell them that holding Earth will require at least 5 million troops in perpetuity. Tell them that we can expect to lose approximately 100,000 personnel per year to resistance activities. Tell them that every human civilian must be considered a potential combatant." Mordoun's eyes widened. "Sir, those numbers are conservative estimates," Zarketh finished. "The humans are not fighting to win, Captain. They are fighting to make our victory as costly as possible. And they are succeeding." He turned back to the window, watching his soldiers patrol the conquered city. "They will bleed," he said quietly, repeating words he had heard in intelligence reports. "But they will never surrender." For the first time since the invasion began, General Zarketh wondered if conquering Earth had been a mistake. Outside his window, the city seemed quiet and peaceful, but he knew that appearances were deceiving. Somewhere in those ruins, humans were planning their next attack. They were building weapons, gathering intelligence, preparing to strike. They would strike again tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. They would never stop, never rest, never surrender, and slowly, inexorably, they would bleed the hegemony dry. The emergency session of the Galactic Hegemony Council convened in the same crystal hall on Zephyria Prime, where the war had been decided 2 years earlier. But the mood was very different now. Where once there had been confidence and certainty, now there was tension and fear. Commander Vexathari, now promoted to Supreme Fleet Admiral, stood before the assembled aliens. His scales had lost their shine, and his eyes held a weariness that had not been there before. Behind him, holographic displays showed casualty reports, resource expenditures, and strategic analyses from across the galaxy. The Earth situation has become complicated, he began. General Thraxon of the Hive Queens clicked her mandibles impatiently. Define complicated. Vexthari gestured to the displays. In 2 years of occupation, we have lost over 200,000 personnel on Earth alone. We currently maintain 5 million troops on the planet, and they request reinforcements monthly. A sound like grinding metal came from the collective's section. Inefficient use of resources, their synthetic voice stated. Population of 7 billion humans controlled by force. Mathematical analysis suggests alternative approaches, such as, Admiral Quilthes asked from his water tank. He had been promoted after the conquest of Earth, but the victory had changed him. He spoke less now, and when he did, his voice carried a strange sadness. Total elimination, the collective replied without emotion. Remove all human life. Problem solved. The hall erupted in discussion. Some species supported the idea. It would end the constant drain of resources. Others objected on practical grounds. Earth was valuable, and its infrastructure would be needed. That will not work, a new voice said. Everyone turned as Ambassador Kethamora floated into the hall. The ancient ethereal looked even more translucent than before, their light dimmed by what could only be called grief. You were not invited to this session? Vexthari said coldly. I was not invited to the last session either, Kethamora replied, and look how well that turned out. The ambassador floated to the center of the hall, their glow brightening slightly. You think the problem is confined to Earth. You are wrong. The human infection is spreading. New displays activated around the hall. They showed incidents from across the galaxy. Rebellion on Centauri 7, resistance movements on Vega Prime, protests on Arcturus Station. Observe, Kethamora continued. The Centauri Federation was defeated and occupied 50 years ago. They had been peaceful subjects for decades, but now they fight again. Why? The displays showed Centauri rebels using human tactics, improvised explosives, suicide attacks, civilian resistance networks. They have learned from watching Earth, the ambassador explained. They have seen that the mighty hegemony can be hurt, can be made to bleed, can be forced to pay a price for conquest. General Thraxon's compound eyes fixed on the images. These are isolated incidents. Local populations testing our resolve, are they? Kethamora asked. Show them the pattern analysis. The displays changed, showing a galactic map with incident markers. The pattern was clear. Rebellions and resistance movements were growing in number and intensity across the galaxy. Worlds that had been peaceful for generations were experiencing unrest. It began 6 months ago, Kethamora explained, when news of human resistance reached other conquered worlds. They saw that the hegemony was not invincible. They saw that even the most primitive species could make their conquerors pay a terrible price. Admiral Quilthes studied the displays. But these other species are not human. They do not have the same characteristics, Mike. No, Kethamora agreed. But they have learned from human example. The idea is spreading. The idea that death is preferable to submission, that resistance is possible even against overwhelming odds. Vexthari moved to the central podium. Even if this is true, it changes nothing. We will crush these rebellions as we have crushed others. At what cost? Kethamora asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Everyone present knew the answer, but no one wanted to say it aloud. The cost was enormous. The hegemony had built its empire on the principle of swift conquest, followed by peaceful occupation. Defeated species would accept their new status, provide resources and labor, and eventually integrate into hegemony society. It was efficient, cost-effective, and had worked for thousands of years. The humans had broken that system. Now, for the first time in galactic history, an occupied world was more expensive to hold than it was valuable. The constant resistance, the need for massive military presence, the disruption of economic activity. Earth was bleeding the hegemony's resources at an unprecedented rate. And worse, the example was spreading. I have a report from General Zarketh, Vexthari said, activating a communication channel. The hologram of the Saurian general appeared in the hall. He looked tired, older than his years. Behind him, the ruins of a human city stretched to the horizon. General, Vexthari said, give us your assessment of the situation on Earth. Zarketh was quiet for a moment before speaking. The situation is stable but precarious. We control all major population centers and infrastructure. Human military resistance has been eliminated. However, civilian resistance continues at unacceptable levels. Define unacceptable, General Thraxon demanded. We lose an average of 400 personnel per day to resistance activities, Zarketh replied. Supply convoys are attacked regularly. Administrative personnel require constant protection. Local human collaborators are assassinated faster than we can recruit them. The numbers were staggering. 400 casualties per day meant nearly 150,000 per year, more than many entire military campaigns had cost in the past. What is your recommendation? Admiral Quilthus asked. General Zarketh was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Withdraw. The hall exploded in shocked voices. Calls of outrage, disbelief, and anger echoed off the crystal walls. Impossible, Vexithari shouted over the noise. We do not retreat. We do not abandon conquered worlds. Then send more troops, Zarketh replied wearily. Send 10 million. Send 20 million, because that is what it will take to truly pacify this world. You exaggerate, General Thraxon said. Zarketh's image turned to face the Hive Queen General. Do I? Let me tell you about yesterday. A human child, perhaps 8 years old, walked up to one of our checkpoints. She was carrying a flower, a simple white flower from their gardens. The general paused, his expression haunted. The child handed the flower to our guard, smiled at him, and walked away. The guard thought it was sweet, innocent. 5 minutes later, the flower released a cloud of toxic spores. The guard and 3 others died in agony. A child, Zarketh continued, 8 years old, trained by her parents to kill aliens. This is what we are fighting. Not soldiers, not an army, but an entire species that has decided death is preferable to surrender. The communication channel went quiet. In the Crystal Hall, the assembled aliens contemplated what they had heard. Ambassador Kethamora floated forward. May I tell you about the humans I have observed? Without waiting for permission, the ancient being began to speak. I have watched them for cycles. I have studied their behavior, their psychology, their fundamental nature, and I have learned something that you must understand. The ethereal's glow brightened as they continued. Humans are not like other species. Most beings, when faced with overwhelming force, will seek accommodation. They will find ways to preserve themselves, their culture, their future. This is rational, logical, sane. Humans are different. When faced with extinction, they do not seek accommodation. They seek to make their extinction as costly as possible for their enemies. They believe that dying free is better than living as slaves, and they will teach their children this belief generation after generation. Kethamora paused, letting the words sink in. You cannot break them because they do not fear death more than they fear submission. You cannot intimidate them because they see your strength as something to be resisted, not accepted. You cannot win their hearts and minds because their hearts and minds reject the very concept of conquest. The ambassador turned to address the full assembly. I came here today to show you something, to prove what I have been trying to tell you since this war began. A new hologram activated in the center of the hall. It showed a human female, middle-aged, wearing simple clothes. She was sitting in what appeared to be a basement or tunnel, speaking to a camera. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the woman said. I was a professor of history at Columbia University before the invasion. Now I am a resistance fighter in the ruins of New York City. The assembled aliens leaned forward, studying this seemingly ordinary human. I know you are watching this somehow, Dr. Harper continued. I know you think we are defeated. I know you think we should surrender. So let me explain why we cannot. She held up a photograph, a family picture showing herself with a man and 2 children. This is my family. My husband died in the orbital battle. My son died defending our home. My daughter was killed 3 months ago while sabotaging an alien supply depot. Dr. Harper's voice remained steady, matter of fact. I am the last one left. I am dying slowly from radiation exposure, something I got while helping to destroy your command center in Manhattan. I have perhaps 2 weeks to live. She looked directly into the camera. You might think this makes me desperate, ready to surrender, willing to negotiate. You would be wrong. The professor leaned forward. I'm going to die anyway. The question is whether my death means something. Whether it contributes to the cause of human freedom. Whether it helps make your occupation of our world too costly to continue. She stood up, moving out of the camera's view. When she returned, she was holding what looked like a crude explosive device. This bomb will kill me and destroy an alien communications facility. It will disrupt your operations for perhaps a day. In military terms, it is insignificant. Dr. Harper sat back down, cradling the device gently. But it is not about military significance. It is about the principle. It is about the idea that humans choose their own fate, that we do not accept conquest, that we do not surrender. She looked at the camera again. You can kill me. You can kill every human on Earth, but you cannot kill what we represent. Other species are watching. They are learning. They are beginning to understand that the hegemony is not invincible. The recording ended with Dr. Harper walking toward the camera, carrying her bomb. The Crystal Hall was silent. Ambassador Keth Mora's voice broke the silence. That recording was made 3 days ago. Dr. Harper succeeded in her mission. The communications facility was destroyed and 12 hegemony personnel died with her. The ethereal floated higher, their glow now almost painful to look at. This is what you are fighting. Not an army, not a government, not even a species. You are fighting an idea. The idea that some things are worth dying for. Vexathari found his voice. One human extremist does not represent... She represents all of them, Keth Mora interrupted. Every human on Earth would make the same choice if given the opportunity. Death before surrender, freedom or extinction. This is their nature. General Thraxon's mandibles clicked nervously. Then we exterminate them. All of them. Completely. And prove to every other species in the galaxy that this is what happens when you resist the hegemony? Keth Mora asked. Do you think that will make other worlds more compliant? Or will it convince them that they have nothing to lose by fighting? The question hung in the air like a poison cloud. Admiral Quilthes spoke slowly. What are you suggesting? Keth Mora's glow dimmed to almost nothing. I am suggesting that this war cannot be won. Not in any way that matters. You can conquer Earth completely, but the cost will bankrupt the hegemony. You can exterminate humanity, but the example will inspire rebellions across the galaxy. The ancient being paused. Or you can withdraw from Earth and negotiate a peace treaty. Recognize human independence and end this bleeding wound before it kills us all. The suggestion was met with outraged shouts from across the hall. Withdraw, negotiate with primitives, recognize the independence of a conquered world. It was unthinkable. But as the shouting continued, some of the assembled aliens began to consider the mathematics. The cost of holding Earth, the growing unrest across the galaxy, the resources being diverted from other priorities. For the first time in galactic history, the hegemony faced a choice between pride and survival. And they were beginning to realize that they might not be able to afford both. 3 years had passed since the first hegemony ships entered Earth's solar system. What had begun as a simple conquest had become the longest, costliest occupation in galactic history. The crystal halls of Zephyria Prime now echoed with arguments that would have been unthinkable before the human war. Supreme Fleet Admiral Vexathari stood before the Council one final time. The reports he carried told a story of an empire stretched to its breaking point. 12 full battle fleets remained in the Sol system. Resources, desperately needed elsewhere as rebellion sparked across the galaxy. The situation has become unsustainable, he announced to the assembled aliens. His voice lacked its former confidence. The humans have learned to strike beyond their own world. The holographic displays showed the evidence. Human resistance fighters had somehow acquired faster-than-light capability. They had struck supply convoys in the Alpha Centauri system. They had sabotaged mining operations on Vega 7. They had even attacked a minor hegemony outpost in the Rigel sector. How is this possible? General Thraxon demanded. Earth is completely blockaded. The humans are adaptive, Vexathari replied carefully. They have learned to capture our technology and reverse engineer it. More concerning, they have made contact with resistance movements on other worlds. Admiral Quilthes floated in his tank, studying casualty reports. The numbers are staggering. We have lost over 500,000 personnel in 3 years. The economic cost exceeds the value of 10 Earth-sized worlds. From the machine intelligence section came the emotionless voice of the collective. Analysis complete. Current trajectory leads to hegemony collapse within 50 cycles. Probability, 87%. The words hit the assembly like a physical blow. The collective did not exaggerate. Their calculations were always precise. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment, the artificial minds continued. Current approach inefficient. Alternative solutions required. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the crystal hall. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in red as defensive systems activated across Zephyria Prime. What is happening? Vexithari demanded. A communications officer rushed into the hall. Sir, we are under attack. Impossible. This system is protected by humans, sir. They have somehow reached our core systems. The main displays flickered and changed, showing scenes from across the hegemony's capital world. Human ships, crude, patched-together vessels clearly built from salvaged alien technology, were striking at key installations with suicidal precision. But these were not random attacks. The humans had targeted communication centers, power generation facilities, and most importantly, the quantum processors that coordinated hegemony fleet movements across the galaxy. How many ships? Admiral Quilthes asked. 37 vessels detected, sir. All converted from captured hegemony hulls. 37 ships against the most heavily defended world in the galaxy. It should have been a slaughter. Instead, it was a masterpiece of tactical sacrifice. The humans had learned more than just alien technology. They had learned alien psychology. They knew that hegemony commanders would never expect an attack on their capital. They knew that defenses would be designed to repel massive fleets, not small, fast-moving raiders willing to die for their mission, and they knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum disruption. One of the displays showed a human corvette ramming directly into a communication hub. The explosion took out the entire facility and disrupted quantum communications throughout the sector. Another showed human fighters using their own ships as guided missiles, targeting power generators with devastating effect. But the most shocking image showed a single human ship approaching the orbital defense platform that protected the council chambers themselves. Incoming vessel on collision course. The communications officer reported. All defensive weapons firing. The human ship took hit after hit, its hull glowing white-hot from energy weapons. Pieces of armor plating flew off in all directions. But it kept coming. At the last moment, the ship's communication system activated. A voice filled the crystal hall. Calm, professional, resigned. This is Captain Jennifer Martinez, formerly of the Earth Defense Force, currently commanding the resistance vessel, Defiance. I bring a message from the people of Earth to the galactic hegemony. The ship was now so close that its bridge was visible on the displays. Through the shattered viewport, the assembled aliens could see a human female in a makeshift uniform, her hands steady on the controls despite the carnage around her. You came to our world thinking we would surrender, Captain Martinez continued. You thought we would accept conquest, bow to your superior technology, become your slaves. You were wrong. The ship shuddered under continued weapons fire. Systems failures cascaded across its hull, but it maintained course. For 3 years you have bled on our world. You have learned what it costs to fight a species that will not surrender. Today we bring that lesson to your home. The display showed the captain's face clearly now. She was young, perhaps 30 years old. She should have been living a normal life, working, raising a family, enjoying peace. Instead, she was about to die in the vacuum of space, thousands of light years from home. But she was smiling. We are not your enemies by choice, Martinez said. We are your enemies because you made us your enemies. We did not want this war, but since you brought it to us, we will show you what war really means. The Defiance struck the orbital platform at full velocity. The explosion lit up space like a new star, visible from the surface of Zephyria Prime. The platform was destroyed instantly. The shockwave shattered windows in the crystal hall hundreds of kilometers away. In the silence that followed, Ambassador Keth Mora floated into the center of the chamber. The ancient ethereal's light was so dim it was barely visible. Now you understand, they said quietly. This is what I tried to warn you about. This is what humans become when you try to conquer them. The displays showed the aftermath of the attack. 37 human ships had struck across the planet. All had been destroyed, but not before accomplishing their missions. Communications were down across the sector. Power grids were failing. The coordination systems that managed the hegemony's vast fleets were offline. They cannot win, General Thraxon said, but her voice lacked conviction. This changes nothing, doesn't it? Kethemora asked. Look around you. The most secure world in the galaxy has been attacked by humans using converted scrap metal for ships. If they can reach us here, where are we safe? The question echoed through the hall. where indeed, if humans could strike at the very heart of the hegemony, what was the point of all their defenses? More importantly, the ambassador continued, look at what they accomplished. Not military victory, they knew they would all die. They accomplished something much more valuable to them, which is, they proved that the hegemony can be hurt anywhere, anytime, by anyone willing to pay the price. They proved that even the most powerful empire in the galaxy is vulnerable to those who refuse to surrender. New alarms began sounding. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The attack on Zephyria Prime had been a signal. Resistance movements on dozens of worlds were rising simultaneously. The human example was spreading like wildfire. On Centauri 7, the long-pacified population was attacking hegemony installations with improvised weapons. On Vega Prime, civilian workers were sabotaging mining operations. On Arcturus Station, a general strike had brought commerce to a halt. But the most shocking report came from the Sol system itself. Sir, a communications officer announced, we are receiving a transmission from Earth. It's Admiral Chen. The hall fell silent. Admiral Chen had died in the battle for Earth 3 years ago. Everyone had seen her ship destroyed. That's impossible, Vexthari said. Sir, the transmission is authenticated. It is definitely Admiral Sarah Chen. The main display activated, showing a human female in a tattered uniform. She was older, scarred, missing her left eye, but she was unmistakably the admiral who had defied the hegemony at the beginning of the war. Greetings, Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber. I am Admiral Sarah Chen, commander of the Free Earth Defense Force. I am broadcasting from the bridge of our flagship, the New Enterprise, currently in orbit around Earth. The implications were staggering. If Admiral Chen was alive, if Earth had built new ships, if humans were still fighting after 3 years of occupation. You may be wondering how this is possible, Chen continued. How a dead woman can be speaking to you. How a conquered world can still resist. How primitives with obsolete technology can threaten the mighty galactic hegemony. She leaned forward, her remaining eye fixed on the camera. The answer is simple. You never conquered us. You occupied our cities, destroyed our governments, killed millions of our people, but you never conquered us. Because conquest requires surrender, and we have never surrendered. Behind her, the bridge bustled with activity. Humans in makeshift uniforms worked at stations built from salvaged alien technology. Everything looked improvised, jury-rigged, desperately assembled. But it was functional. For 3 years we have bled, Admiral Chen said. We have suffered. We have died. But we have also learned. We have adapted. We have grown stronger. The display changed to show views of Earth from orbit. What the aliens saw was shocking. The planet they thought they controlled was covered in human military installations, hidden in ruins, disguised as civilian structures. Shipyards operated in underground caverns, factories built weapons in abandoned subway tunnels. While you were congratulating yourselves on your victory, we were building, Chen explained. While you were counting your conquered worlds, we were preparing. While you were spreading your forces thin across the galaxy, we were concentrating ours. The view shifted to show the space around Earth. Hundreds of human ships floated in formation. Not the sleek, advanced vessels of the hegemony, but rough, dangerous-looking craft built for war. Today we take back our world, Admiral Chen announced. Not because we think we can win a traditional war, but because we refuse to accept defeat. Because some things are worth dying for. Because we are human and humans do not surrender. The display showed the beginning of the battle. Human ships swarming toward hegemony installations in Earth orbit. The aliens had superior weapons, better shields, more advanced technology. But the humans had something else. The absolute certainty that death was preferable to slavery. General Zarketh appeared on another channel, his image showing him in the ruins of New York. He looked exhausted, defeated. They are everywhere, he reported. Every human on the planet is attacking simultaneously. Civilians, children, the elderly. All of them have become soldiers. We cannot hold. The assembled aliens watched in stunned silence as their conquered world erupted in total war. But this was not the desperate last stand of a dying species. This was the coordinated assault of a people who had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. Recommend immediate evacuation, General Zarketh said, his voice breaking. We cannot win this. We were never fighting an army. We were fighting an idea, and you cannot kill an idea with weapons. Supreme Fleet Admiral Vex Thari stared at the displays showing the collapse of 3 years of occupation. Hundreds of thousands of hegemony personnel were dying or fleeing. The most expensive conquest in galactic history was crumbling in hours. "Sir," an aide whispered, "what are your orders?" Vex Thari looked around the crystal hall. He saw fear in the eyes of beings who had never known defeat. He saw the proud representatives of 1,000 worlds contemplating the unthinkable, that they might lose. "Withdraw from the Sol system," he said quietly. "Sir, you heard me. All ships, all personnel. Full evacuation. Immediate implementation." The hall erupted in shocked protests. Withdraw? Abandon a conquered world? It was unprecedented in 10,000 years of hegemony history. But Admiral Quilthes was nodding slowly. "The Admiral is right. We cannot win this war, not in any way that matters. We could destroy the planet," General Thraxon suggested desperately. "Glass the entire surface. End this once and for all." Ambassador Kethamora's light flared. "And prove to every species in the galaxy that this is what happens when you resist us? How many other worlds would rise in rebellion? How many other species would decide that dying free is better than living as slaves?" The truth was unavoidable. The humans had won, not through military victory, but by making conquest too costly to maintain. They had taught the galaxy that the hegemony could be resisted, could be hurt, could be defeated. They had proven that some species would rather die than surrender. As the evacuation began, Admiral Chen's final transmission reached the council chambers. To the members of the galactic hegemony, she said, "Let this be a lesson. Earth is free and Earth will remain free. We did not seek this war, but we have finished it." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "You thought you could conquer us because you were stronger. You learned that strength means nothing when facing those who refused to be conquered." The transmission began to fade as human forces overran the last hegemony, communications post on Earth. "Remember us," Admiral Chen said. "Remember what it costs to fight humans. Remember that we will bleed, we will suffer, we will die, but we will never surrender." The display went dark. In the crystal hall on Zephyria Prime, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in stunned silence. They had built an empire on the belief that overwhelming force could conquer anything. The humans had proven them wrong. Ambassador Kethamora floated alone in the center of the hall, their ancient light casting long shadows on the crystal walls. "I warned you," they said softly. "I tried to tell you what they were, what they would become if you attacked them." The ethereal turned to address the full assembly one final time. "The humans have taught us something valuable today. They have shown us that there are some things more powerful than weapons, more dangerous than armies, more eternal than empires." "What?" Vex Thari asked. "The idea that freedom is worth any price. The belief that some things should never be surrendered. The knowledge that even the mightiest empire can fall if enough people refuse to accept its rule." The ancient being began to fade, their energy finally exhausted by years of trying to prevent this catastrophe. "The humans will rebuild their world. Other species will remember their example, and the galaxy will never again be the same." As Ambassador Kethamora disappeared, their final words echoed through the hall. They bled, but they never surrendered, and in never surrendering they won. The galactic hegemony had ruled for 10,000 years, but on this day, watching their fleets flee from a primitive world in a distant corner of the galaxy, they learned that empires built on force alone cannot stand forever. Somewhere in space, human ships were returning to Earth. Somewhere on that blue world, people were emerging from tunnels and bunkers, seeing sunlight without alien shadows. For the first time in 3 years, the war was over. Earth was free. But the real victory was not in the battles won or the enemies defeated. The real victory was in the message sent to every corner of the galaxy, that freedom could not be conquered, that the human spirit could not be broken, that some things were worth dying for. In the years that followed, the phrase human defiance would become legendary across the stars. Species that had lived under hegemony rule for centuries would remember the blue world that refused to surrender. They would whisper stories of Admiral Chen and Dr. Harper and Captain Martinez and all the others who chose death over submission. And slowly, one by one, other worlds would begin to resist. The galactic hegemony still existed, still controlled vast territories, still commanded powerful fleets, but it would never again be unopposed. The humans had cracked the foundation of fear that held the empire together. They had shown that even the mightiest tyranny could be challenged. Earth stood alone no more. Across the galaxy, the seeds of rebellion had been planted, and those seeds, watered with human blood and nurtured by human example, would grow into a forest of free worlds. The humans had bled, but they had never surrendered. And in never surrendering, they had changed the galaxy forever.